Hey everybody, it is me, Lisa. How are you doing? I am continuing to admit people into this chat room. And Liv, I think you're going to need to mute me because you should be able to hear. My daughter is right here with me, so we're figuring out the sound system. How is everybody? Over in the chat box, I'm going to post a couple of questions for you, and I'm going to post them in all capital letters, so they'll be easy to find, okay? How do I mute just you? You're going to have to mute your entire computer. Oh, okay. That's question number 1. Have you ever homeschooled before? I'm really interested to find out where all of you are in the process. And I see a handful of familiar names. And I see a bunch of new people, some new names. And let's see, Dewey, is it Dewey or Dewey? How do I pronounce your first name? I know you're a member of Survival Mom Sisterhood, so I recognized you right away. And I expect some more Survival Mom Sisterhood members to join us. I am considering doing another one of these on Friday, probably the same time, maybe 2 p.m. Central. Okay, wonderful. Floriana, New Brunswick, Canada. Floriana, I definitely would like to go there someday. In fact, I think about a year ago, I was looking at airfares. We have never been to, I've only been to Montreal and Toronto. And so would love to explore the part of Canada where you live. All right, we have some dads in here, maybe granddads. All right, question number 1, Alan, if you can't hear me, check, my microphone is unmuted. So Alan, if you can't hear me, check the speakers on your computer, okay? And we'll see if we can't get that connected, because I definitely want you to hear me. This is being recorded, and so I will be uploading this to YouTube. You can go to YouTube, and you need to search on YouTube. You need to just look for my name, Lisa Bedford, and that is where I put videos. I also need to connect right now over to Facebook, and this takes just a moment to do. So just give me a moment for that. I want to make sure I share it on the right page. There we go, the Survival Mom. We're calling this one Launching into Homeschooling. And so when you go to my YouTube channel, also if you are on Facebook and you find The Survival Mom on Facebook, you will see a recording of this. Give me just a minute. I have to jump through a few hoops. And I'm going to go live over there on Facebook. Technology is an amazing thing. It can also be one of the most frustrating things on earth. Years ago, I read this quote, God allowed everything possible bad to happen to Job, except giving him a computer. Can you relate to that? Just think about the times when, oh my gosh, you couldn't get something connected. Alan has told me that he can't hear me. And it can be extremely frustrating, but I see that I am live on Facebook. I'm just going to leave a comment right there. And just FYI, just for this group call, as well as for others in the future, the easiest way, if you want to be able to interact and ask questions or whatever, the easiest way to do that is to be actually on the group call link. So it's tricky for me to go back and forth from the group call, the Zoom group call, over to Facebook and then back, answering questions. So if you are thinking, oh, I want to ask questions, maybe in the future, we might even have some breakout groups. And I don't know, have any of you done that before? I know for sure if you are in Survival Mom Sisterhood, you're very familiar with that. And Zoom allows me to create small groups of maybe 3 people or 4 people, and maybe have small groups with other very experienced homeschool moms, and just kind of brainstorming things together. So that may be a possibility in the future. I definitely, as I read more and more on my communities forum, and I asked in a couple of my Facebook groups, what are your thoughts about homeschooling? What are your questions? And, oh, Alan can hear me. Okay, Alan, I'm glad. Lots and lots of questions about homeschooling. So I'm going to post one more question here. And it is, have you decided to definitely homeschool this fall? And I'd love to hear if you have really made that decision and you're going to jump right into it. And by the way, feel free here. You can get on your webcam or not. It doesn't matter to me. I know some of you, it looks like you have some avatars up there. That is fine too. So no pressure to be on a microphone, no pressure to be on camera. I know in Survival Mom Sisterhood, we do group calls like this all the time. And so my members who are part of that, this is just, whatever, you know. Sometimes if a member has to go let their dog out, she just carries her computer or her phone with her. It was very, very casual. So years and years ago, I know my mom, she talked about back in, this probably would have been the 70s, there was just, you know, oh, technology, someday we're going to all have telephones with a camera. And I remember my mom saying, I will never have that in my house. I don't want to have to worry about what I look like if someone calls. And now guess who has multiple webcams in her home, and she even has some kind of a funky Facebook portal. She has a Facebook portal, you know, where she's just loud and proud. And I don't think she worries. Selfies. And she loves selfies, go figure. So anyway, I want to welcome everybody as we go. Feel free to ask questions. Let's see, Charlie and Barbara Faust say they want to try homeschooling. And by the by, I'm hearing from lots of grandparents who are either going to take over the task themselves, or they are going to help, you know, their children or their grandchildren with homeschooling. Okay. Tana, welcome. How are you doing? Tana is seriously considering homeschooling this fall, and so I want to do what I can to facilitate that. And really only until you give it about maybe 6 months or more will you know what to do. Melissa is still Melissa is still contemplating it. Jamie is either homeschooling or remote learning through the district. We're going to talk about the differences between the traditional homeschooling, really what homeschooling really is, versus the schooling that you do, the remote school that you do through your school district, and even the virtual academies that have become popular over the year. Let's see, Emily says she started homeschooling in January and she plans to continue. So let me just tell you, first of all, right up front, there are so many options, and this is a great time actually to be alive if you have grandkids or kids and you want the very best for them. All right, so I wanted the best for my kids, and I think we did okay. You know, both kids are taking college classes. My daughter is here. You want to jump on your camera? Sure. My daughter is here, and I like to think that they did okay. You know, they turned out okay. So let me introduce myself first of all. If you got an email from me, or you saw this on Facebook, I'm Lisa Bedford, and I've been a long time blogger. I'm an author of 2 books, and neither book, ironically, has anything to do with homeschooling. I think I mentioned homeschooling in my book, Survival Mom. But one of the very first articles I wrote 11 years ago was titled, Why Preppers Should Consider Homeschooling. And in that article, I made a case for homeschooling. And in fact, you can actually go to my blog anytime, not right now, but anytime, and you can look up homeschooling. And I've written, I don't know, maybe a dozen, 15, 20 articles about homeschooling, and I plan to add some more. So we're at a very confusing time in our country and in our world. We are. And what I want to do, if you're feeling unsettled about sending your kids to back to public schools for any reason whatsoever, okay, I want you to know, first of all, you are in very, very, very good company. I have gotten questions from hundreds of parents, and hundreds of questions on Facebook. Everybody, you know, your heart may be leading you to this, you know, point, or your mind is just saying, we need to do this because, and you have a long list of reasons, or maybe just one really critical reason. You're at a time in history where at least you have choices, all right? So real quick, besides being a blogger and an author, I actually run a website. It's a membership website for women, and it's called Survival Mom Sisterhood. And I provide training every single month in different aspects of just being prepared. And so we have group calls like this very often. And right now registration is kind of casually open. Haven't really been talking much about it for weeks, but it's survivalmomsisterhood.com, and you can take a look at that membership. I also have courses that I have written over the years on different kinds of survival prepper topics. But I have been homeschooling last year was my last year. And you know, I have the same bittersweet feeling that a lot of you can relate to when your kids move out, or they go on to college. And it's like, oh, I'm proud and it hurts at the same time. So realizing that this last year was my last year of homeschooling, it was bittersweet. And at the same time, I want my son to get serious about college, make a decision about what he's going to do, because I don't want him to live here until he's 30. I'm sure you can all relate to that as well. My daughter said he can hear me. But the same thing goes with you, Miss Sassy over there. But I homeschooled the kids from kindergarten on. Very, very briefly, I graduated from college with a degree in education. I'm going to tell you why that's not necessary and why it might actually work against you as you homeschool. But I got the degree. I went on and I taught junior high, 7th and 8th grade at a school in far northern Arizona. I'll never forget it. I lived in an apartment and the only heat I had was a coal-burning stove, wood-burning stove, depending on what kind of fuel I could get. Then from there, I went on and taught 4th grade. From that point, I went on and I became a trainer for one of the biggest school districts in the Phoenix area. And I walked into classrooms that were just amazing, creative teachers. The kids were inspired, they were motivated. And just as often, I walked into classrooms that were nightmares. And the schools and the teachers and the principals alike shared responsibility for that. But even before that, I decided to homeschool. And so we had so many reasons for homeschooling. And one of them is that I'm a very spontaneous person and I love just doing things at the drop of a hat. So as homeschoolers, we were able to go to Disneyland in the middle of the school year. And sometimes we would be there and we would finish our ride on It's a Small World. No one was in line, and the Disney workers or their team, not team members, they have a special name for them. But they would say, well, do you want to go on it again? And there's no one in line. I mean, that was fun. So we would do a lot of things kind of just opposite of the traditional public school kids. And we loved having that flexibility. Now, I happen to have my #1 student over here, #1 only because I have 2, and my son is at the other end of the house. But I have my daughter here, and she is going to be giving some of her own commentary. So you're going to get to hear from me, from a mom's point of view, as well as from someone who was actually homeschooled, kindergarten, all the way to high school. You probably didn't even realize that could happen. And let me tell you, the high school homeschool years can be the easiest ones of all. All right, so Leah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Olivia. Lisa is my mom, obviously. She's sitting over there. And I was homeschooled K-12, and it was probably one of the best experiences of my life. When I see different comments on Facebook groups and on social media of parents who want to homeschool, I always try and hop on there and tell them about just how awesome it was and the amazing experiences I had. And homeschooling really allowed me to become the person that I am today. I was never bullied, I never dealt with peer pressure, and it was really amazing, and I could pursue what I wanted and what I was interested in. And I'm currently a junior in college, getting a dual degree in political science and economics. So feel free to criticize my choices if you like. But I'm really excited for both of those things. I love them a lot. And it was actually homeschooling in part that led me to realize how very passionate I was about those 2 topics. So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. Just, yeah, can't wait to talk with you guys.
And Olivia is just very opinionated. And I will say she's been a delight. Here's an example, though, of not being a public school kid. When she was maybe 8, she loved art. And I would buy her canvases and different kinds of paint. And we still have probably maybe at least 15 or more of her paintings, around the house. Some are up and then some are in closets. But one day I learned about a program at the local public school by us. And I think it was called Little Picasso or something like that. And they were going to walk the kids. We paid for it, maybe $100 or something. So she would go for X number of weeks. And her very first week we got there, we show up at the classroom door, and she's the only homeschooler there. And so the teacher comes out and she says, okay, everybody line up. And so public school kids automatically knew there's a girls line and there's a boys line. So Olivia goes and lines up in the boys line. She didn't know, I mean, when else in your normal life do you ever have a line just for males and just for females? That's very foreign. And so that was just so funny. And I remember just kind of nudging her, hey, buddy, honey, that's the boys line. And you need to be in the girls line. Yeah. So that is just kind of in a nutshell, you know, who we are. We've been at this a very, very long time. But right now, just kind of being at an unusual time in history, just a few of the reasons that I'm hearing from you, I'm hearing from readers who email me or they leave comments on Facebook, a few of the reasons they're giving me for wanting to homeschool right now is in no particular order, and this does not describe everybody, but a fear of the virus spreading. Maybe a fear of their kids getting the virus or bringing it home, or maybe even a fear if they become infected, passing it on to teachers or whatever. Another one is their kids being in face masks all day long. And we don't even know yet how healthy that is for, you know, let's say an 8-year-old, a 10, whatever age, to wear a face mask all day long. And here in Texas, that's going to be required, including at times outdoors when they have said you can't, you know, have a distance of 6 feet or whatever the arbitrary distance is between kids. So it's going to be more difficult, you know, socializing, you know, participating in sports. How do you do that? So those are some reasons. Also, a concern that I have, and I'm just going to make a prediction. I don't have a crystal ball, or I'm not a prophetess, but how can a school stay open when there are diagnoses of additional cases? You know, if you're going to be this strict about the face masks and the distancing, et cetera, and the washing of hands and all that kind of stuff, well, let's say that you find out that a parent of one of the kids is now diagnosed as positive, or one of the kids, or a staff member. How are you going to keep a school open? Why would that not be the same as what we experienced this past spring, when one school after another, one district after another started shutting down? I do not know what that is going to look like, except I can predict it's going to happen, and I can also predict there's going to be a lot of confusion. I also know, to be fair, that school districts and the educational departments of states, various, you know, all the 50 states, have been mulling this over for the past 3-4 months or whatever. And, you know, to be fair to them, based on the information they're being given, they're making the best of the situation. And it's all foreign territory to everyone involved. You also, at this point, we have no way of knowing what additional requirements a state or a county or a city or an individual school district is going to require. So if there are X number of cases in a school, maybe the state or district is going to have a new rule. We don't know. And there's so much uncertainty. And really the bottom line is this is just a very abnormal educational setting for any kids, regardless of how you feel about masks and distancing and all that kind of stuff. Whatever data you're seeing, whatever reporting you're seeing, it is an abnormal scenario for our students. And there are a lot of parents, what I've been hearing, and it kind of surprised me, is a number of parents who just didn't want their kids in that kind of a setting. Everyone's mileage may vary, as they say. And so it really is your judgment. But I'm assuming you're here because you're exploring the possibility. Maybe you've already made the decision. I got some emails this morning from people who said, hey, I've homeschooled for a long time. I just need some new inspiration. I just want to hear what you have to say. So of course, everyone is welcome. Do you need to have a degree or a license? Well, first of all, if you're taking notes, I would highly recommend, I'm going to type this here. Get it all tired. HSLDA.org. I do think that you should go to, first of all, no, you don't have to have a degree, you don't have to have a license. But depending on the state, there can be some pretty funky requirements. So one state may just kind of have a free-for-all, you know, just register your kid and just so they're accounted for. I do know some renegade homeschooling parents that refuse to register their kids. They just didn't see any reason for it. All right, just saying, that's, you know, point of view of some people. But you'll be able to see there. Some states require that you put together a portfolio, you know, examples of their work throughout the year. But if you go to hslda.org, look for your state and just look for just whatever requirements they have. I'll talk more about HSLDA in just a minute. My theory is this. Here's my theory. My theory is that not only do you not have to have a degree or a license, a degree of any kind, maybe especially a degree in education like I did, because I had the degree, I had the experience, I actually trained teachers to be successful, and yet I struggled. I'm just going to be very, very honest. There were times where I just was so frustrated I could just cry. And the degree didn't really help me. Here's my theory, that all of us here, unless any of you were homeschooled, the only education system you know is your experience K-12, possibly your experience in college. So you may very well have 16 to 24 years in a traditional classroom setting, sitting at a desk, having textbooks, having workbooks, having everything pretty much teacher-led, teacher-directed, having a very strict structure of what you can learn, what you can't learn, how many minutes you have for this subject, and so on. And for a lot of us, that's all we've ever known. And so our first instinct, of course, is to set up that same scenario for our kids. Am I right? That's all we've ever known. And it kind of is hard to get out of that mindset and into a different mindset that I'm going to talk about in a moment. So I had some homeschool mom friends. They didn't have the degree. They were never teachers. And you know what? In a lot of ways, they were better homeschoolers right out the chute than I was. And I learned from them. That's my answer. If you have been feeling inadequate because you don't think you have the background, the experience, the degree, whatever, let me tell you, you can just toss that aside. You're going to run into challenges, but not having the degree or experience, the formal training is not going to be one of the challenges, all right? For those of us that just had that 100% traditional school mindset and experience, it takes a little bit to get out of it. One thing that Liv and I talked about today is that we don't want to paint too rosy of a picture where, you know, this is just going to be some kind of an educational nirvana. Because if you would, you know, I think, in fact, you can even over in the comment section, you can just say yes or no if you agree. Parenting is hard. Do you agree? In the chat box, just yes or no. Parenting is hard. So I'm starting to see some yeses. Would you agree that parenting changes from age to age? And sometimes moment to moment, sometimes kid to kid. You don't do everything the same with kid A as you do with kid B or C. So a lot of it is just kind of intuitive, right? Where you're just kind of making decisions sometimes on the fly. There's some things where you have to research, oh my gosh, you know, my kid is doing this or they're acting like this. What do I do? Well, homeschooling is very similar, all right? So just as your kids and your parenting is not the easiest job in the world, homeschooling, you're going to have moments where it's not the easiest job in the world. All right. So there are going to be times, I just want to be very realistic, that you may just say, oh, I just want to give up. It would just be easier just to ship that kid off to public school and then just let somebody else deal with it. Oh, Liv, I forgot to get that dish strainer organizer thing. So before we go on, I just want to give you a really good and easy tip for organizing all the materials that you're going to start accumulating. So maybe even you already done this. Maybe you've gotten a couple books on how to homeschool. I had a few of those too. And maybe you're going to start getting, you know, some textbooks, or you're getting just different kinds of resources. This is how I ended up organizing all my materials. Let me see if I can pull it back a little bit. This is a sink dish drainer. I had to look up the official word on Amazon. A sink dish drainer. This is just stainless steel, and it used to have a little thing on this end. We probably have it somewhere. Just like a little cup where you would put, you know, your silverware, your forks and spoons, so they drain if you're going to hand wash your dishes, right? This is perfect for organizing your school supplies. You have these little slots here. I would go with like here and here and here and here. And it's perfect for adding your textbooks, your workbooks, notebooks, everything. You can easily organize them here. And then when you buy yours, and like I said, I have this somewhere around here, it is going to have some kind of a little cup thing that clips on here, or maybe it's an all-in-one if it's all plastic. And that's where you can put your markers and your pens and your pencils and scissors and whatever other smaller supplies. Plus, they're lightweight, and your kids can just learn to carry them around. you know, if you are going to homeschool at the kitchen table, but now it's time for them to go to their, you know, bedrooms or someplace else where they're going to be doing some schoolwork. You could easily just load this up in the car, and you could even have one of these for yourself. I don't know how much they are, but it's not very much money. I mean, I'll probably find these at a dollar store. I think I bought these on Amazon. And I got the stainless steel version just because I figured it would be the sturdiest, but any kind works. So that is one of my top tips as far as beginning to get your things organized, because you're going to find that you have just books and supplies all over the place. But if your kids know part of their routine is to put things back in their own, I'm going to call it drainer, their own drainer, or their organizer, maybe that would be more impressive with kids, their own organizer, that's going to help you out a lot. Another quick tip, if you're taking notes, this is actually a biggie. I want you to set up a morning and an evening routine, first of all, for yourself, a morning and an evening routine, because part of staying sane in this whole process is just going to have set routines that everybody is familiar with. So your morning routine, just as the parent or the grandparent, might be, you know, you get up, you get ready for the day, you know, you make the bed, you go in and have a quick bite of breakfast, maybe, you know, you just feed the dogs or whatever. So you have your own morning routine. That sets the stage for you, and then begin setting up routines for your children. Maybe everything just is done in 15 minutes, but the more routines that you can set up in your day so your day is structured, the easier it's going to be for you. And I know some of you have said that you have, you know, kids who maybe they're autistic, or they have, you know, sensory issues. And this, having the routines and kind of knowing what's expected each day, maybe even have things in writing. At one point in the summertime, I would have calendars posted, June, July, and August, and I would have activities scheduled there, and we knew what to expect as the summer progressed. So have this sink dish drainer. This is a suggestion. Have one of these for yourself, for your own homeschooling supplies, you know, teachers' editions of textbooks and so on, and maybe a 3-ring binder of different articles or checklists or whatever that you print out, and then begin creating routines if you don't do that already. So morning and evening routines for yourself, and then begin putting them in place for your students. The nice thing about the routines is that they are easy to teach, model, accomplish, and then you can even add some kind of incentive in there. You know, so if you do your routines, you know, on Friday, then we're going to do such and such, some kind of a special treat, or we're going to go to Dairy Queen or something. So you can begin to, you know, I'm not against incentives. I personally love incentives. Okay, I'll do a lot of things around the house if I get to know, I know I have a cheese enchilada and a margarita waiting for me on Friday night. So nothing wrong with incentives. I mean, that's what a paycheck is, or a bonus, or whatever. So let's dig into a few different ways to homeschool. And Liv, you were going to do some commentary here? Just signal to me.
Okay.
Okay, signal to me if you want to talk, because I think people want to hear from you too, because you were actually the first guinea pig of all. Actually, in my side of the family and my husband's side of the family, to my knowledge, we are the only homeschoolers. So here are 4 different homeschool styles. And as I talk through these, and if you feel like one of them really resonates with you, go ahead and type in the chat box which one you feel is going to be the best fit. First of all, one of them is just what I would call school at home. I'm going to, Olivia, you type that in all caps, school at home. So this is what millions of families experienced this last spring semester. And basically everything centered around what was supposed to happen at the school, except parents were trying to do this at home. One mom told me that every single morning she had to wake up, go online to her email, and then print out a selection of worksheets for her kindergartner. I'm going to just posit that kindergartners should not be subjected to worksheets ever. There's just no need for it. So from what I heard, it was frustrating for parents. One friend of mine, she works from home as a graphic artist, and she was having a heck of a time scheduling her clients, you know, in between the hours that she had to spend with her 3 sons and doing school. So school at home may be the only choice, maybe the only choice you have. It's going to be all, you know, school-led, district-led, et cetera. Going back to that kindergartner, what I would say, if you have little ones, I would just say, why do you even think it has to be school? You know, I mean, just think, my daughter actually took some plastic shapes to a little girl that she babysits, a 3-year-old, and they were sorting and putting into patterns and grouping these little plastic, you know, dinosaurs. I bought them years ago as counters. If you want, go on Amazon and you just look up like just counters. You know, you can get like little tiny teddy bears, you can get little dinosaurs in different shapes. Oh my gosh, I mean, sorting them, putting them in A-B patterns, A-B-B-A patterns. There's so much you can do. Let them stand on a stool and watch you go through a recipe. You can read aloud. They can help mom around the house. Explore the outdoors. Spending time outdoors is maybe one of the very best things that you can do for kids of all ages, as they just soak in nature and they begin to just learn how to hone their observation skills. I'm going to touch on that in just a moment when I give you a reference for what elite private schools do. So, and I will also be scheduling a homeschool group call just like this, but I want to talk specifically about grades K through 2. So watch your email, watch Facebook. That's the first model. The other one, Liv, is K-12 virtual academies. Connections Academy is one example of these. These started because they became kind of popular, I don't even know, more than a decade or so ago. And it's tuition free. You get all the books. In some cases, maybe a lot of the cases, I don't know about every case, but you might even get a free laptop to do the school. You are given, and there are exceptions, but typically you're given a weekly, maybe even a daily schedule of things you have to do. Because this is basically, it's just a slightly different version of public school at home. There will be requirements almost always for seat time or seat hours. Again, going back to kindergarten, another mom here over on Facebook, they were required, her kindergartner had to do school 6 hours a day. Personal opinion, that's obscene. You know, if you have a 4, 5, 6-year-old, they need to be active, they need to be exploring things, they need to be handling things. They're going to be learning, just soaking things up as sponges. Just not into that. So, but this can work for families who need a lot of structure. I mean, I told you what my background was. Homeschooling was intimidating to me. And I'm telling you, if you're taking notes, the only way to do it is just to jump in and just do it. You know, it's kind of like parenting. You know, when I had Olivia, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but the time was, came for me to leave the hospital. My husband and I were there. They handed us to Olivia, and I swear, Steve and I looked at each other and we're like, they're letting us take her home? Now what do we do? I mean, we were scared. You know, what do we do now? We didn't know. We had never raised a kid before, and we just did everything by the seat of our pants. All right, you adjust as you go, but first of all, you just have to go, right? I mean, if we were still standing there in the hospital and we were frozen with fear, we would never have parented this amazing girl. So with homeschooling, make the decision, if you're going to do it, just start moving forward, because nothing is in stone, okay? Yeah. You may however, no judgment from me whatsoever if you decide to do school at home or virtual academy. Just you do what you do is best. I did know one family who started out as a virtual academy, and for different reasons, it was just too time consuming and it was just very restrictive. And the very next year, they just went into what, would be typically called homeschooling. An important word, if you're taking notes, I want you to write the word pivot, P-I-V-O-T, pivot. Knowing what it's like to be a classroom teacher, I have almost no ability to pivot. If I notice that a textbook really spends very little time on one subject or another, and I have a classroom of kids who were just fascinated, let's say, by the Vietnam War. When I was a junior high history teacher, the joke among the history teachers was our students pretty much thought that history ended with the Korean War. We never got through pretty much any farther than that. So if a classroom teacher, they can't just go and find other textbooks. They can't pivot. If one kid is struggling, if one kid wants to race ahead, if one kid's bored because they already know all this stuff, there is no pivoting really in a public school classroom. As the homeschool parent or grandparent, you can pivot at any time. That's part of the beauty. So you'll pivot pretty often as you work to customize your schedule. Depending on what's happening in the family, you're going to pivot the curriculum. I think we went through 4 different math curriculums. Some were good at certain ages and then unworkable at other ages. So pivoting is really an important thing. But the K-12 academies, they are going to be free. You are going to get the books. You might even get a computer. So just know that there are some pros and cons. You might also want to research the success of virtual academies. I have read a bit, and they are not necessarily super successful as far as turning out students who are testing at certain grade levels or achieving certain grades. Let's talk about grades just for a second. I don't have this in my outline. A lot of times the first thing that parents want to know is, how do I test? Okay, again, we've all been in the traditional classroom 12 years, 16 years or more. Okay, we're used to the traditional, the quizzes and the tests, and then the test every spring, where some districts will spend a month teaching kids how to take the test, getting them ready. They take the test. You know, it's just it's a miserable time for a lot of kids and the teachers. Okay, that doesn't have to be a thing. Just because of our circumstances, my kids never took a standardized test. They could have. So once you hook up with local homeschool groups and hslda.org, you can register, if you want, you can register your kids for the annual ritual of the standardized test. My daughter took 2 standardized tests, an SAT and an ACT. Oh, she took the PSAT. So she took 3 standardized tests in her life. And the ACT gave her a score where she got a full ride scholarship. And I congratulated her and I said, you made it through 12 years of school, only taking the 3 standardized tests. You now have a full ride scholarship. And unless you go into law school or something like that, you know, and just why? Sometimes we parents are the biggest roadblock when it comes to schooling, just because we think it has to be done a certain way. A friend of mine who was a homeschool mom, Stacy Valenzuela, she made the comment once that the point of homeschooling is mastery. It's mastery. Imagine a classroom teacher with, 23, 25, maybe 30 kids, all right? And she sees that a handful are struggling. She only has a limited amount of time. I mean, to be honest, I was there. Only a limited amount of time to go back and reteach and correct and show someone, here is the mistake, the pattern of mistakes you're making. Limited amount of time. And I know a lot of teachers are frustrated with that. As a homeschooler, you can go back. You can identify. And this is one reason why there's no great need for tests or testing, because as you go, you're monitoring their success. And you can see right then and right there where they're struggling. Stop, make the correction, give them some practice, and move on. Not possible in a whole classroom setting in the public school. I mean, it's just not. Just the logistics, the time limits, the demands on the teachers. So that's a word about testing. Now let's move into traditional homeschooling. Okay, so we talked about school at home, virtual academies, and those are going to be at home, but all the materials, the schedule, and so on, provided by basically the public schools. Virtual academies are funded by public taxpayer dollars. That's why it's free. Traditional homeschooling. This is what we did. You are 100% in charge. You have lots of freedom. There's so much just versatility here. You can totally customize your child's education. I know homeschool families that hit the road. One family, they had a number of kids, they had an RV, and they traveled around the United States for a year and a half. And everyone managed to get educated during that time, maybe much better educated than their peers who were going, heading to a classroom every single morning.
Wrote a novel.
Oh.
I'll use my speaker. But talking about the same family that my mom mentioned, one girl actually had the time between her school and looking after her younger siblings as well. She had time to write a novel while they were traveling. And I never read it, but she liked to brag about it, so that's how I
And that actually is one of the secrets of homeschooling, is that Remember I mentioned the kindergartner who had to put in 6 hours a day. The truth is that your homeschool day can be structured however you want. And one of the beauties of it is that you can actually take whatever subjects, you know, in books and reading assignments, etc. And that can be done, I mean, in honest to God, in kindergarten, first grade, especially into second grade, that can take 2-3 hours a day. What would that free your kids up to learn? My kids took horseback riding lessons. They were on an archery team. They were in competitive rowing. They were in competitive swimming teams. Gosh, some part-time jobs. I mean, just, and that's another thing. So it really is a much more well-rounded experience because they're not getting up at 7 to be at school at 8 or 8:30, coming home exhausted, you know, 3:30 or 4 by the time they actually get home. Then they have homeschooling. Some of their, you know, their interests, their passions, there just isn't much time. Okay. And that was I think one of the biggest values to my kids growing up. So traditional homeschooling, you're 100% in charge. And I got to be honest with you, it's overwhelming. There's so much curriculum out there, so many resources, so many different possible groups to join. Where do you start? Like I said, you know, you have to start somewhere. Just like with parenting, you had to start taking the baby home from the hospital. Okay, you did that. Now you sit down and maybe you're going to nurse the baby. Okay, we did that. You know, put the baby down for a nap. Okay, we did that. Homeschooling, same thing. Okay. The curriculum, it can be textbook based. There are some, and you can decide if you want a secular or you want a religious based education. There, you have all those options. As a Christian family, we used a curriculum. It was just, it kind of was here and there. It wasn't just like, you know, fully, you know, religious education necessarily. But there is just so much out there. Ready-made, there's ready-made curriculum, and a popular one is Alpha, I think, no, it's not Alpha Omega. Anyway, maybe someone, if you know, type it in there. Abeka. Now, Abeka is a Christian-based curriculum, but it's everything. You can buy the entire first grade curriculum, not just from Abeka either, but you can just, you know, click first grade or whatever your grade is, and you get a shipment, and it's all there. All right. What you don't get is a daily schedule, required seat hours, or anything like that. I think that maybe I'm a natural rebel, and I didn't want just to have one, you know, I guess I didn't want someone telling me what to do. My kids turned out okay, but that's the freedom that you have. If you really want to have that all-in-one curriculum, it's there. My prediction is if you start like that, you're going to end up with that just kind of morphing, where you might say, you know, I don't really love this science textbook. And you might ask around, hey, in a homeschool group or a homeschool Facebook group, what are you guys using, you know, for science or health? Or you realize that there is nothing in here about health, you know, human anatomy and so on. I'd really like to spend time with that. My husband spent a few weeks teaching the kids anatomy and physiology. They had coloring books, you know, where they would sit down. And that only lasted a few weeks, but still, you know, it happened. In our home, I just did all of the homeschooling. My husband was running a business, and, you know, but he was supportive, which was nice. It's not like he was fighting me all the time, wanting to put the kids in public or private schools. But it's very likely that you will begin to make pivots, large pivots, and just small pivots. And eventually you're going to have, you know, maybe you use this resource for spelling, because your kids just love it. We had one spelling book Olivia just loved. And it was kind of fun. She took a pre-test, I think, beginning of the week, and then she did different activities only on the words she missed. And then on Friday or Thursday or Friday, she would have a second test, you know, for mastery. But anyway, the curriculum can be overwhelming. Unfortunately, with the virus, any actual in-person homeschool conventions, I imagine they've all been canceled. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my guess. But moving forward, look for homeschool conventions near you, and there will be speakers for all different subjects and all different ages, and you'll have tons of homeschooling textbook companies and people offering all kinds of resources, more than you could ever imagine, and you can see the stuff in person. But I suspect they've all been canceled for this summer, which is when they usually take place. Let's see. Funny thing about homeschooling is a lot of people who don't homeschool, or maybe they're actively anti-homeschoolers, they really don't know the resources. I have a friend who homeschooled back in the 80s when it was a real pioneer time for homeschoolers, where you had to just come up with your own curriculum. And now we're kind of, homeschoolers today, there's just, like I said, there's just almost too much. But you're going to find friendships, you're going to find support in online homeschool groups as well as in person. Another advantage is that you can homeschool anywhere, anytime. Liv, why don't you tell them about your friend?
Which friend? Isabel. Oh, I had a friend growing up. We were friends for quite a while, maybe like 8 or 9 years. And her family actually owned and operated a restaurant chain in the city where we lived. And so she would usually be totaled along with her mom to the different locations and off on all of the errands that were necessary for the business. Sitting in on meetings with her mom, and just a lot of car time involved. And so she would do most of her school online. They had a very heavily online-based curriculum. It was mostly paperless, like she didn't have textbooks. It was all online, so it would be portable. And so she would do the majority of her school just in the car while they were driving, or while she was waiting for her mom to do something. And which was very different for me because I had almost all physical copies of textbooks because that was what I preferred. And I would just sit at home to do my school. And so that's just kind of an example of just how you can make your school work for you instead of you trying to force yourself into a routine or a format that just isn't working for your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, did I unmute myself? I think an easy way to, just kind of a pithy way to say that is, you want your homeschool to fit your life and family, and not try to force your family to fit the homeschool. All right. So you can do school anywhere. And by the way, when I say do school, it really is just learning. I mean, when we took the kids to Disneyland, they were learning, they were picking stuff up. Going to the beach, going just to, around, errands, they're learning. And I would bet anything, for those of you that are here, you can probably think of a time when one of your kids or grandkids piped up and they made some kind of observation and you're like, oh, I didn't know they noticed that. And maybe it could have been something you did, or was like kind of embarrassing. It's like, oh, I better watch what I say around that kid. They're like, they see and they hear everything. They're constantly learning. And so that is one of the advantages. I like that you can totally customize it. So let's say you have 2 kids, A and B, and maybe kid A just is racing through math, moving on to the next grade. There is nothing stopping them. Okay, the real travesty would be if they were forced to stay in lesson 12 when they could have moved on to lesson 15, 20, be done with the textbook, move on to the next grade level. With this homeschooling, the traditional homeschooling, possibly the K-12 Academy, I don't know. But with the traditional, you can just move them on. And it would not be unusual for one student to be ahead of a grade in one subject, maybe to be behind a little bit on their grade level in another subject, and at their grade level in other subjects. Everything is just kind of customized to them. And remember, pivoting at any time. So if you have kid B and they may need to move a little more slowly in a subject, maybe spend a little more time here and there on a concept, there's no shame. There's no bullying, because they will shine in other areas. And so it really does bring out the best in students. Olivia was telling me a funny story about bullying, because, there was no bullying in our house. We were just kind of all in this journey together. But at one point, I think you went to a co-op?
Yeah, it was Keys.
Okay, so in Phoenix, there was a really large, and you got some amazing education there. Oh my gosh. She had almost like a world-class American Sign Language teacher who was outstanding. And but tell them about the situation. She had a couple of young girlfriends there. Maybe this was, what grade?
Oh,
6th maybe?
I think it was, I believe it was maybe in 8th grade or so. And I had a couple of girlfriends that I would hang out with pretty often. We had 3 or 4 classes together. And we also had study hall together, and study hall, nobody actually studied. But at one point, they sent me a fake note from a guy that I liked, and they pretended it was from him, and then they were like, psych, it's not actually from him, LOL. And they kind of poked fun at me for a while, and I cried. I was like, that is so mean. Like, I'm your friend, why would you do that to me? And I remember when that happened, I was like, is this bullying? Because I didn't know. I was like, is this what it's like?
Okay. That's funny. When she was telling me the story today, she said, I was just baffled. Where did this come from? And I would say to any adult who says that kids need to be bullied, bullshit. Kids in school have no recourse. If you're being bullied in the workplace, you have recourse. You have even options where you can take that up the chain of command, so to speak. You can even go to a federal level and you have recourse. Kids in school, they can be bullied mercilessly. And the effects of bullying can last a lifetime. And so I would, here in the home, we would talk about, how to treat people. My husband and I, our kids they were learning from us. We were modeling appropriate behavior, the way that you disagree with someone. And we're modeling that for them. They are not in a jungle atmosphere where they are learning how to treat other kids who are different from them. That's what they're learning. Why is that okay? Why is that okay? As a classroom teacher, I can tell you it was extremely difficult. I would say impossible to do away with bullying, whether it was, maybe physical, if it's actual physical bullying, and you can separate the kids, whatever, listen to their stories, deal with it, call parents. But there's so many other subtle ways that really bruise and damage children. And that's why we have all these anti-bullying campaigns. And do they work? Yeah, they don't work. They don't work. Maybe it raises a level of consciousness where, like Livia said, is this what bullying is? Probably it was just more like kind of teasing, let's send her a note from a boy, tee-hee-hee. But nevertheless, that is something that I just think is needless, just needless. Anyway, so another thing, I have kind of a hero. Type in John Taylor Gatto. I read this man's book early on, and he was, I believe, New York State Teacher of the Year more than once, John Taylor Gatto. You should read anything he has written. His articles are online, maybe for free. I know his books are on Amazon, but I want to point something out to you. Over on YouTube, and you can type this link. He has a series of videos, and I don't know if it's 2 or 3 videos, I don't know how many, but it is called the Elite Private Boarding Schools. The elite private boarding schools. And what he did is that he studied the curriculum that these very elite academies offered their students and required of their students. And as I was watching this, they were learning public speaking, and they were learning art, they were learning observation skills, and they were learning philosophy. All the things that are not taught in public school, but all the things that you can include in your homeschool. So the executives, the big CEOs of the major corporations here in the United States, the tech giants, the senators, they're sending these kids to these elite private boarding schools, and they are not being educated the way public school kids are. So if you would like to take a look and think, what could I do to really give my kids even a richer experience? Go there. Because public speaking, Olivia, you were in the public speaking club for a few years. My kids have read Shakespeare, they've read Plutarch. Gosh, what else? Art lessons, art appreciation. We haul them to art museums, whenever we get a chance in our travels. But you might even just get as disgusted as I was when I compared, as a former teacher, when I compared what I knew to be offered in the public school classroom compared to what, the elites. Not even a conspiracy theory, but they're training these students as they get older, they're training them to become the next senators. They're training them to become president of the United States, ambassadors, and so on. Their education, it ain't like what you get in public schools. So if you want to find out other ways to really make your kids' education more rich, then I will take a look at that. Finally, one more style, and I would say there are probably other styles, just maybe subcategories, but another one I want to pop in here is unschooling. Unschooling. The first time I ever heard of unschooling, I was aghast. how can that even be, you know? And, you know, unschooling, oh yeah, I know who you are. You're the ones that you don't make your kids do anything. They're the ones running wild around the neighborhood in the middle of the school day, and, you know, they just do whatever they want. Well, I think that's kind of it sounds, the unschooling, the idea sounds crazy, but a lot of times it is basically doing school anywhere and everywhere, but not using traditional resources. All right. So it can just, you know, it's also, I've heard it called child-led learning. And Olivia and I, we saw delight directed learning. And I was friends with people who did this. And one woman, we happened to sit next to each other on a bus ride or train ride or something somewhere. And she said, oh yeah, I'm an unschooler. She looked as traditional. She looked like a traditional school marm in person, but she said, we just loved it. And she went on and on and on. She would make her own, you know, counting toys, you know, for her kids, and they would do math on popsicle sticks. And it just consumed the whole family. A critical point to know is that once you get into homeschooling, it may very likely, and I would say it's optimal for it really needs to become just the lifestyle. It's just the lifestyle now. And you don't worry so much if on Monday, all of a sudden you have to run some errands, or you have to go check on grandma, or you have to do some grocery shopping, or you got behind in something here and there. Don't be surprised if every day is just a little bit different. Just give yourself a lot of grace, a lot of patience, because the learning is happening. And remember, moving on, the goal is, goal maybe? But what you're going to see develop in your homeschooling is you want to nurture the love of learning, and you want to develop independent learners. And Olivia, you were going to talk about reframing what a successful student is, or what a successful school day is.
Yeah, so I think it's really important for anyone jumping into homeschooling is to kind of reframe what you think is a successful day of school, a successful learning environment, a successful student, because if you've been through traditional schooling your whole life, then you have a very limited knowledge of what it looks like to learn and what a successful individual looks like. But really part of the beauty of homeschooling is you get to let kids be successful on their own terms. You get to let them really just kind of grow and be interested and excel in the areas that they're naturally gifted in. You get to kind of change. Oh, did I mute myself? I think I did. On accident, sorry. But yeah, that was just something really important, is just kind of letting go of we've only had a successful school day if we learn X, Y, Z, or if we spent X hours reading a certain book. Just, you just kind of let that go, and just kind of let it go where it needs to.
Okay. Yeah, I would just say that you I think reframe is a really good thing. That's kind of what we've been talking about, is that there's no cookie cutter way to do this. When I was reading through questions that people have for me, a lot of them were very specific, and I too wanted to know exactly how to do this. The thing is that you just have to dig in, and you're going to see that there are resources available, there are people that you can talk to, but there's no one perfect way to do this. And just like there's no perfect way to parent. You can talk to people who are parents, but ultimately it comes down to you and your kids, and just the unique setting, the unique lifestyle, the unique personalities and temperaments involved. So that's why I'm just encouraging you just to get in and do it. Two things. As you develop just a lifetime love of learning, and you can do that just by kind of watching what people are interested in, take advantage of seasons of the year and weather and things that you just accidentally run into, a coyote, that you happen to see, out in, the forest, or you go on a camping trip. Whatever it is, take advantage of those moments and just encourage them just to learn. Look something up on the internet, go to the library when they reopen and check out books, etc. If they're fascinated by some subject, remember the public school will only give X number of minutes allowed, right? But in your homeschool, you can give them all the time they need to dig deep into subjects they're fascinated with. My nephew Jake, who is now a very successful materials engineer, he just had a fascination for tornadoes. He wanted to learn everything about tornadoes. I think one time he made a chart for me showing volcanic eruptions and the different sizes of volcanic eruptions through history. So just nurture that. And by the way, a lot of these things you can do even if your kids are public schooled. All right, so you can still give them some advantages and nurture that love of learning. The second thing is, and this is huge, is to develop independent learners. Now keep in mind, in the public school classroom, private school classroom, you can, everything is teacher directed. X number of minutes, this is the assignment, this is exactly what the assignment needs to look like. These are my requirements. No problem with having some requirements and so on, you know, especially as the kids get older. They need to learn to read written instructions and then, you know, proceed from there. But you can actually begin developing independent learners at an early age. So for example, you might tell your third grader, your fourth grader, whatever, hey, you're going to be reading this book. I'm going to put you in charge of when you're going to read it, but you need to have it done by next Friday. So you do a little math. How many pages are in the book? You need to have it done in 10 days, unless you want to add weekend days. How many pages per day? All right, I'm going to check with you, you know, in a couple of days and see, you know, if you've met those goals. So they're learning responsibility. They're learning how to set up goals, to reach goals, time management, but there is some accountability built in. Now, by the time they reach middle and high school, for you to have a kid who loves to learn, who knows how to track down information they're passionate and interested about, and even things they're not. I mean, even as adults, do we love everything we have to do? No. But if you have some time management and you have kind of some self-management, you know, where I don't love to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it needs to be done. By the time they hit middle school, high school, they should be able to schedule themselves and to reach, you know, kind of follow a schedule on their own. And Olivia did this, and I asked her to talk about, you did this really much through high school.
Yeah, so one of the goals ultimately that you should have with homeschooling is to, as they get older and progress, is to have them do more and more of their school independently from you. Because what happens throughout school is that kids are so heavily monitored and their time is basically managed by anyone else but them. And when they get to the college level, that's why so many freshmen do horribly their first semester, is because they do not know how to manage their time without an adult talking to them and telling them how to do things. And that's where we get a lot of like the college memes of these kids staying up until like 2 a.m. writing an essay that they didn't start until 3 hours ago because they just don't know how to manage their time. And so that's what I see a lot with my friends actually in college currently, when they're pulling all-nighters all the time. And I'm like, you didn't plan for your test, you know, that kind of thing. Because by the time I hit about 9th grade or so, I was pretty much completely in charge of my own schooling and scheduling out my assignments. And my mom mentions like looking at a chapter and seeing, you know, how many pages are there? How do I allot it over X amount of days? And I use that frequently now when I'm looking at my different reading assignments for school and planning my week. And I basically use the same learning and scheduling strategies that I had during homeschooling. I use those as a college student. You know, I allot X amount of time I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to try to get through this many pages by Friday, and, you know, on Saturday I'm going to work on whatever, that kind of thing. Is that I know because that was what we did with homeschooling. I know how to manage my own time. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of my fellow college students and people my age and maybe even older just don't know how to do.
All right. Yeah, I saw that for myself. And so just kind of as a homeschooler, as they become more independent, you become more of a facilitator than having to hover over them every minute of the day. But it does take some instruction. I know that Charlotte Mason, she was a British educator who started, I think, 3 or 4 schools in England in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. She talked about if you take the time up front to train your child to do something, wash the dishes, follow a schedule, whatever, then you may have to, correct. You may have to go and say, okay, no, that's not how you did it. You were skipping steps. You were a little bit lazy on this one. Let's try it again. But if you just take the time up front to do that training, then your job becomes easier and easier. And sure enough, Olivia's, especially her last couple of years of high school, I wasn't involved that much. She was taking a handful of classes online, and then she was following the curriculum that we were using, for about 5 or 6, 7 years there, AmblesideOnline.com. So, and I would just jump in and say that as far as developing a love of learning and creating independent learners, public school just doesn't do that. They should, that would be nice, but it just, that's not the model. And it really isn't it's not set up for that. It would be hard to have 25, 28 kids, just the love of learning, but the state says we have to do blah, 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 blah by, the end of this semester, or we have to cover these chapters, these pages. You just kind of throw it out there and just hope that they're going to learn something. And of course, then you have the test to follow it up. As a homeschooler, you're sitting right by your kid, or you're supervising enough where you can tell, are they picking up on this or not? So I'm going to give you a couple of tips, and then I have, we're halfway through our outline, so it means we're going to have to pick up where we leave off. And I'm going to go ahead and schedule this again for Friday. I do believe I have Friday open on my schedule. So probably the same time. And we'll do a Zoom call just like this, where if it's live, I can see your comments and questions just very, very quickly. And then I'll also stream it over to Facebook as well. I'm going to upload this to YouTube. And so probably later on this afternoon, if you go to YouTube, Lisa Bedford, that's where you're going to find this, as well as another homeschooling group call that I did, I think it was last week. My number 1 tip for you right now. Okay, so far I suggested, refresh my memory.
Book thing.
Oh yeah, if you're wondering how to organize, I recommended one of the dish drainer things that is perfect for holding books. But I do have a few steps for you. Okay, so if you're taking notes, let me scroll down a little bit. If you're taking notes, I'm gonna kind of go through these. Where are they? Homeschooling, hold on. Yeah, we had quite a few notes. I don't know where my little quick thing went, but that's okay. So number 1, I would just suggest the very first thing, go to hslda.org. hslda.org. Homeschool Legal Defense. I think the A stands for association. Now, hslda.org, it's a Christian-oriented organization. However, if you ever need to have legal advice, let's say that someone down the street turns you in to Child Protective Services because they see your kids out in the front yard during the school day, all right, HSLDA will have your back. All right, and they will have, they'll actually, let's say that worst case scenario, someone is at your door and they'll say, we want to interview your kids. HSLDA, you can call them and you will get an attorney on the phone and they will talk to the person at the door, okay? So I would highly recommend that. You can pay, I don't know what their dues are. It's like a membership dues. You can pay it all at once. It's not terribly expensive, or you can pay it month by month. But on the HSLDA website, you're going to, and this is your number 2 step, go to HSLDA and just kind of read what they offer. Number 2, at that same website, they're going to have it, look up the state requirements for that, your state requirements, and just kind of see. Some states have very limited, and then some states have pretty onerous requirements. So you have to go and just kind of look and see what those are. Nothing is too difficult, but every state has different laws and rules. Secondly, also on hslda.org, but these can be found on other websites. See what is available to you locally. type in and go, I believe HSLDA had a tab or a button you could click for local homeschool groups, and you could connect with local homeschool groups. Most of them will not actually be included on that list, but that will give you a list to get started. Then if you're on Facebook, go to Facebook and do a search. If you're in Detroit, look up Detroit homeschool groups, Michigan homeschool groups, maybe even your county. There's one here, I think it's called North Houston homeschoolers or something like that. And just kind of, if they're public enough, you kind of scroll through and see how active it is, you know, kind of what the conversation's about, and consider joining one of them. So again, the national organization, hslda.org, there might be another organization that does provide some legal support for homeschoolers, but I don't know what it would be, all right? So it's been many years since I have looked into that. Number 2, look up your state requirements. Number 3, look for local groups wherever you are. The next one, number 4, go to my blog, thesurvivalmom.com, and just type in the search. There's a little search. By the way, my blog is actually in the process of a massive redesign. So if you go there and things look kind of funky, you know, just come back maybe in a couple of weeks and it'll be different. But type in the word homeschool, and you'll find a lot, you know, getting started with homeschool, my mistakes. In fact, I was going to post this maybe today, the mistakes I've made as a homeschooler and the best things I've done as a homeschooler. Lots and lots of homeschooling resources for you there. Number 5, this to be number 5, and that is start homeschooling today. Even if it's just, you know, it gets to be, let's say 7 p.m. your time, it's after dinner, you know, say to the kids or grandkids, hey everybody, we're going to do a nightly story time reading. Okay, or we're going to go outside and we're going to see how many different bugs we can find, how many different leaves we can find. Let's go outside and let's see if there's some frogs out there. Last night there was a frog by our door. I almost couldn't even go to sleep, he was so loud. So observe nature. Observing nature is huge, huge. Developing not only just observation skills, but learning about classifying, identifying, drawing, looking for details. You know, how does this butterfly differ from that one? And you know, how do we classify, you know, insects? How do we classify, start finding out, well, you know, no, a snake is not, a frog is amphibious, you know, but is a toad, and just begin doing your research there. So start homeschooling today, whether it's a read aloud, whether it's getting out into nature, it's going for a walk. And I think for right now, that is where I'm going to just cut this off. So you have a short list of things to do. We will resume on Friday, and I'll be sending out an email. I'll probably send an email out tomorrow and then a reminder on Friday. And by the way, with my emails, if you're not interested in homeschooling, I think on a lot of those, you can just email me and say, you know, Lisa, you know, I'm not going to be interested in homeschooling or whatever. And then I think there's a way to delete you from that, but not all of my emails. So believe it or not, 21st century email software is extremely complex, and I have not mastered it. So anyway, but I'll send you emails for Friday. And if that has to change, if I'm something on my schedule I don't know about, but we'll go ahead and do Friday, 2 p.m. All right, we're going to continue. I want to share with you the specific curriculum that we use, how we use it. Olivia, I know, has some other stories for you, and we will just move forward. So we're kind of launching into homeschool hand in hand, one step at a time, and I really hope that this has helped you. Over in the chat box in the group call, and remember, if you're on Facebook, I just can't see the questions easily. Okay, but if you are on the live call, any questions that I can answer quickly, and if I think that it's going to require a longer answer, then maybe I can do it. Someone says, Floriana, how do you help your child learn another language? Yeah, my daughter.
Okay, this is something I'm very passionate about because I took several years of American Sign Language actually in middle school and high school. And I would say if you know someone personally who speaks the language, that would probably be the best option. Any way you can get your child immersed in the language is really the best avenue you could possibly take, because my grandmother actually knew she knew sign language, and so Mom would drop my brother and I off to hang out with her for a few hours, like every Wednesday during the summer or something. And all we would do would be to sign with each other. She would teach us songs, and it was really fun. And then I moved to taking it in a class, and that was excellent because as soon as we walked into that class, our voices were off, and we just had to use our hands to talk. And I've taken some really bad second language classes. And so I would say whether if you know someone who speaks the language or if you know of a good teacher, regardless of where they are, I think maybe you could even, if you're at a school, you could get your kid to maybe just take that one class. I don't know if that's allowed everywhere, but you could try that. But just try to find the teacher is the best teacher you possibly can. It would probably be my biggest advice.
As well, there are a lot of online resources. And really, in the era that we live in Zoom calls just like this, you can actually take live language lessons. So it would just be a matter of just kind of researching and looking around. But Floriana, she says, ask your neighbor. When we lived in Phoenix, I was told by someone, I forget who, that the very, very best way for my kids to learn to speak Spanish was just to play with Spanish-speaking kids. In our case, it was mostly kids from Mexico, either them, directly or their parents or grandparents. And they just said, let them play together, and just tell the kids who can speak Spanish, hey, I want you to speak Spanish around my kids. And kids will, here I am at my age, I need to learn how to speak Hungarian. Just for some odd reasons, but I do. I need to learn how to speak Hungarian. The chances of that are just slim. I'm going to try to learn, but man, Floriana and anybody else, yes, add a foreign language to what they're doing. And it can easily be something that they can do independently. Just kind of, you can hook them up where a language teacher has lessons just like this. When we get back together, Olivia, remind me, I want to put together a list of online homeschool co-ops. Real quick, and I'm going to end. My son took astronomy from a former, I believe he was an Air Force or Navy colonel, and his passion was astronomy. He would be out there in his yard, wearing his funky shirts, and he always wore, white socks with sandals, and he would be, showing kids how to set up different things to measure angles and the stars and all this kind of stuff. Passionate. When you start looking into online homeschool co-ops, what you're going to get are instructors who are just madly passionate about one subject or another. Olivia had a writing instructor for about 3 or 4 years, Mrs. Metcalf, and Mrs. Metcalf lived and breathed to teach writing, okay? And Shakespeare, anything you can think of, and these are people who, they don't make much money. Your chemistry teacher, she had chemistry, she had anatomy and physiology, all these kinds of things. These are people who are so passionate about it. They're not really there to make a ton of money. My son's, he took British literature last year. His teacher, oh my gosh, she would make up songs, and she would sing the songs to these high school juniors and seniors. And, the kids would break out into small discussion groups, and it was just amazing, just the education they got from some of these. So just very quickly, if you have the older kids, we did a combination of some independent work and some in person, I think, and we did a Scholars Connection. We did some in-person type co-ops.
Mostly science, math, and writing.
Yeah, and then we also did the online co-ops. Lots of stuff. Cheryl mentions resources for learning disabilities, what if kid needs speech therapy. Cheryl, I would, for that specific piece, then go to the public school and say, how do you plan on providing this? Because that is their taxpayer-funded responsibility, all right? I do know people who have used the IEP from their school district, and then they took that home, and then they replicated that on their own. So that's what I would do for, I would ask them, I would say, hey, the ball's in your court. I understand that there is, this epidemic going on, but it really is, you tell me what you're going to provide, and then go from there. All right. Chances are there is a lot as you kind of move into more personalized instruction. And Cheryl, activity-based. you know, because your child, you might be surprised at what he or she, I'm not sure, son or daughter, what they can learn when it's hands-on and then it's mom right there and they're not lost in a sea of other kids and a distracted teacher. Not every teacher's distracted. I was one and I loved my students passionately, but there are other ways of providing an education. And for those of you that are looking to do this for your kids, for your grandkids, I just want to say, I wish I could just reach out and hug you. All right, we're going to resume here Friday, 2 p.m. on my YouTube channel, Lisa Bedford. You'll see another kind of a group call that I did several days ago, and I'm going to put this one up there later today. Bye, everybody.